What's going on, KGBs? Welcome back, and thanks for helping me cap off what was a splendid birthday week. I got to thank everybody who made a point to repost things and welcome me a happy birthday on the interwebs. Helps a long way and towards us getting towards our goal of helping create a better world, a kinder, gentler world. Really excited for this week's episode. Our topics are going to start with Russell Westbrook, signed with the Nuggets, baby, coming to the Mile High. The reason this is specific is that his wife is a therapist. We'll talk more about it. In BDTT and Bro Motion's Hall of Fame, we're actually going to combine those and honor one of me and Richie's like true heroes, Shea Serrano. And finally, we're going to get into a much anticipated interview where me and a good pal of mine, Mark Katz, MD, break down the 5 and maybe a few more books you need to kickstart your journey to becoming a KGB. Let's go. All right, what up, fam? Welcome back to the journey that is becoming a KGB. It's going to be a good episode for getting there. The books, we're talking about our true KGB Shea Serrano here in a little bit. And here's another guy that fits that role, Russell Westbrook joining the Denver Nuggets. Welcome to the Mile High, my guy. We are happy to have you. Please score off the bench. Please light a fire in the young guys. Please rebound and defend. You're going to fit in great. The culture is good. The vibes are high. These guys love each other. Nikola takes his homies to Serbia. We all know that this team is good vibes and generally a bunch of KGBs. Specifically, the reason we're excited to have Russ in Denver and on this podcast someday, we hope, is his wife, Nina, is a therapist. She's an LMFT, which stands for Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist. She's a big advocate for mental health. She's a huge following on the socials and does really good work. So this is my way of sucking up a little bit and saying, Russ and Nina, we're happy to have you. If you want to think hard about how to contribute to men's mental health, we'd love the support. Mostly, I'm just stoked to have you on the team, Russ. I'm a Nuggets season ticket holder. Huge fan. Can't wait to watch you play, my guy. All right, sit tight. When we get back, we're going to be talking about the homie, Shea Serrano. What up, KGBs? Both Richie and Steven joining you here today because we're going to take things a little differently from here on out, right? Sometimes there'll be shorter episodes. We're going to do social media content. It's going to change a lot. Richie and I were really inspired by something that Shea Serrano said. So Shea Serrano is who we're really excited to introduce, and he is a guy that's really covered a lot of ground we're going to get into in a second. So we thought of him as somebody who both we can break down the tape and induct into the BHoF because he's somebody that Richie and I just admire so much.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about Shea, and we're going to pass things back and forth here, is that he was born in San Antonio in the early 80s. He went to college at Sam Houston State, first in his family to go to college. He was a psychology major, which I just learned prepping for this and makes all the sense in the world when you consume his content. He worked construction for a little while after college before becoming an inner city 8th grade science teacher. And of course, a basketball and football coach on the side. He's transitioned into freelance writing in the city of Houston. Got his big break when he started working with Grantland on The Ringer.
Yeah, Bill Simmons discovered him, allowed Shea to really do some fun articles. He would do like a disrespectful dunk index every year or a couple times a season. And he would also do like the Vin Diesel character matrix and analyze like Vin Diesel's characters in his movies. Kind of just taking like all the things that he loved and just making them fun and interesting to read about.
Yeah, I think that's so good, Richie. Like his unique voice really shines through in all of the things he does, which has been multimedia, right? So from there, he was able to start doing his own books, right? And so he started with the Rap Yearbook in 2014, really popular. The idea is that it's the most important, not the best, rap song in the game of that year, right? So from that, he launched into basketball and other things. Made Obama's Book of the Year list in 2017, right? So he's been a New York Times bestseller with all 4 of his major books. He then continued the And Other Things series with movies and other things, hip hop and other things. So examples in basketball, it's like, what was Michael Jordan's best season? but also which NBA player would you want on your side during the purge? Right. So it's like really just funny shit. You read it, you know he's being right. So, and even if you hadn't noticed, mixed in with the mental health books, I have all 4 of these books back here, right? So even just learning from Shea's experience and his perspective has really fueled both me and Richie in terms of creating content can be a lot of fun. He did these 2 very short form books, not very, but they were considered just PDFs. One of them was on Scrubs called Where Do You Think We Are, which is a very famous, infamous episode with JD and Dr. Cox. I'm repping the Eagles shirt today. And then another really popular one was The Office. It was called Conference Room 5 Minutes. Those are both like interesting structured books. Highly recommend.
Yep. I want to shout out the artist too, Arturo Torres. He was involved with Shea on all of his projects. He's great. I own actually a bunch of his artwork in my own house. I have a bunch of his posters and everything. Yeah, he does really cool stuff.
Like
definitely check him out. But yeah, so after Shea was at Grantland, that shut down. Bill Simmons started The Ringer, brought Shea on at The Ringer, and Shea continued to do, his same funny kind of articles and everything. And eventually he left and broke off, and he started his own publishing company called Halfway Books, where he just self-publishes his own stuff online now, and he just kind of writes whatever he feels like. A lot of his stuff is like pretty zany and wacky, but it all has like Shea's unique voice, and it's just really fun and inspiring to see like you can be authentic to yourself and still be able to put out good content that people want to see and consume and read and hear and listen to.
So people get the pun. Halfway Books is like ain't no such thing as halfway crooks. Just making sure we got the rap reference there. I don't want it lost on anybody.
Yeah. And then in addition to Shea doing, this self-publishing thing, he's done a ton of podcasts. When he was with Grantland and The Ringer, he had The Connect with Jason Concepcion, where they would take 2 movies that don't seem to be related and connect them to each other. He had No Skips, where he would take an album. He wouldn't skip any of the songs on it, and he would just go over the entire album, talking about why the songs are great, why the album's great, and their own Shea's
rap, right?
Yeah,
Kanye's
exactly.
College Dropout, Lauryn Hill,
Yep.
Juvenile's 400 Degrees, which is a fucking banger. That has Back That Ass Up. So it's a really fun podcast.
Yeah. One of my favorite was a one-off thing he did called With a Pencil, where he like analyzed the John Wick movies. I'm a big John Wick fan. Shea's a big John Wick, just action movie fan. So I really enjoyed that one. And then now, like, breaking down the tape is going to be from his current podcast he does with Jason Concepcion called Six Trophies. It's a basketball podcast that they release weekly, where they give out 6 pop culture themed trophies to 6 basketball related activities. But these episodes, they always start with Shea giving Jason like a little anecdote. He had like a really touching story about his son riding a bike that we'll play here.
We called this summer the Summer of Bike, which is a terrible name, but Summer of Bike, because for his entire life he has been terrified of learning how to ride a bike. He's just refused to do it.
Okay.
Refused. His brothers, the twins, picked it up immediately. As soon as they were able to walk, they're like, put me on a bike. They were ready to go. And so they would go on a summer or spring break trip with my parents, with all the cousins, and there would be everybody riding their bikes around. It's like 6 of them, all riding their bikes, and then the baby running behind them, literally running. He would refuse to get on the bike. I'll just run with it. So it's like Sons of Anarchy plus a guy running alongside him. Mm-hmm. We're settled. We're at home. We've been traveling around a bunch. Saturday, I went to Walmart, bought him a bike, came home, gave him the bike, and was like, here we go. It's time, buddy. He said, did you give me a helmet? I said, I did not. And I forgot about that part, but we're good. It's fine. Goal, we're going to do this over like a week. The goal for day 1, you just have to pedal it 3 times on your own. That's it. No training wheels, no nothing.
Yeah,
just 3.
That's
pedal 3 times. Second day, 6 times. Third day, 10 times. We're just gonna build toward that. So we go out there the first day. We're out there for like an hour, and I was joking with him at the time because he sat on the bike and just looked completely he looked like if I gave an iPad to a caveman. Like he had no idea what to do with any of the parts or pieces. No idea. But he got on there and he was like, I got this. I could do this, Daddy. And it took about an hour or so, hour and a half, before he finally got 3 pedals. And when he did 3, he actually added an extra one to it. He did 4 pedals on his first day. And I was like, hell yeah, way to go. I'm covered in sweat. He's covered in sweat. Let's go inside and eat some candy. Second day, the goal was 6, 14 pedals he did on his own. No boost, no nothing. And then third day, yesterday, the fucking breakthrough, 100+ pedals down the street, just cruising. He just got it going. Pedal. It was the most adorable thing in the world, Jason. I'm jogging behind him, ready to catch him when he finally falls down. And I'm holding him like on his ribs from behind him, like under his armpits, running. And he starts pedaling. And then I move one hand and I have one hand on his back. Now I'm just sort of guiding him and he's pedal. And then I just take my hand off before he realizes it. And he's pedal. And then he realizes he's on his own. And he just goes in the tiniest voice, only to himself. He just goes, oh my God. And then it was done. It was over after that. He was riding his bike. We went a second time. He wanted to go again later that day. Now he just can start it on his own. He's riding up and down the street. He showed his mama, telling his brothers, texting all his friends. He listens to the show every once in a while. If you're listening today, my son, congratulations. Yes, applause. I'm so proud of you. I love you. I'm so proud of you. Way to go, boy. All right, you want to start the show?
I'm sure Shea knows this, but from afar, you can tell what a person he is through not only his content, but his presence on social media. He's very active, very supportive. You know, he talks about his family in a healthy way. The kids don't want their names on social media. He blocks their faces, but you can just tell he is an excellent father, a supportive husband. And you can hear it in that content that he says, like, I understand his experience. I know what it's been like for him, right? He understands the baby's experience. He's there to support him. No shock as a psychology major. He understands that we're going to build this bike riding up in stepwise fashion, just like we learned with Harrison last week with ERP, right? We're going to conquer fears in a systematic way. And the man's just awesome. Really just like a guy we just love too much.
Yeah. And like, in addition to like his family, he's like incredibly philanthropic, like with his Twitter account. If someone tweets at him, you know, a GoFundMe for, you know, a classroom that needs school supply, he'll retweet that and ask people to donate. And everything he retweets exceeds goals.
Slides into people's Venmo's DMs and gives them money too. Like, for funsies.
People will be like, hey, Shea, I'm having a tough week. And he will literally just say, okay, what's your Venmo? And Venmo whatever is in his Venmo. He, just a really helpful and genuine person looking to put good out into the world, which is what we're trying to do. So he's obviously going to be a big hero of ours.
He actually made a TV show that won awards and for some reason only got one season, but really funny, really warm, lighthearted, like warm, called Primo. And it's loosely based on his own upbringing. So yeah, it just was really, really good. It's another content rec we would give along with all this other Shea stuff. So
watch it on Amazon Freebie.
Shea's like really famous for these like hilarious quotes that just stick with people, like really cool, authentic quotes. Richie, if you'll flash, right? So Shea, we're shooting our shot, bro. I hope you'll jump in and appreciate our content. We would love, you know, to have your support along the way because of these other quotes of yours, bro. If someone makes things you like, give them money so they can continue to make more things you like. We're not asking for money, obviously, with everybody. We're just asking for support to help us grow and achieve our mission. And finally, I felt this a lot, Shea, as Richie and I were developing this product. Someone's going to do the thing you want to do, so fuck it. Might as well be you. And we feel like there is an opportunity here to grow mental health advocacy in this country and speak to an audience that doesn't regularly get spoken to. So thank you for being an inspiration, Shea, Jason, Arturo, everyone else you've worked with, obviously also all very good souls. And yeah, man, look forward to continuing to try and work and do stuff we think you'd be proud of. So joining today, you might notice that we're rocking a little matching, that behind us is the same logo. So first round of merch just came out. So we're rocking our Get In Fellas t-shirts. Same logo that our guy Harrison made. Looks just like the sticker. There's a QR code that takes you to the link tree, which we love. So Mark, thanks for repping the shirt today.
Thanks.
And, you know, letting us get into this.
Yeah, super excited to be here. I think it's been a long time coming, you know, and we get to talk about some awesome books that we read and just get to kind of, you know, shoot the shit a little bit as well.
Yeah. So the topic today will be the 5 books to kickstart your journey to being a kinder, gentler bro. All right, let's get in. We're going to go quickly through the books and then dive into each book individually, where Mark and I are going to talk about it in more depth. All right. So for the first book, we do not have a hard copy of the book, which makes sense because the book is damn near 100 years old. The first book we're going to talk on is As a Better Coworker, the classic Dale Carnegie book called How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Alrighty, so we have To Be a Better Friend. We have How to Communicate Like a Buddhist by Cynthia Cain.
To be a better romantic partner, this could be currently within your relationship or if you're on the dating trail. A very popular book, and we're going to use this to talk attachment styles, is called Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller.
Let's see. And for parenting, we have The Whole Brain Child. This is by Dan Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. It's a great book, and I'll give you kind of a hint on what's to come. It's 12 revolutionary strategies to nurture your child's developing mind.
Correct. We want to teach people, especially young men, young boys, anything like that it's okay to have feelings. We can talk about them and learn without shaming, especially those non-anger-based emotions like we talked about. So, and then To Be a Better Person, a seminal work so popular these days that you can find it in the airport. The Body Keeps the Score. The initial book on PTSD and understanding developmental trauma and understanding empathy, understanding people and building empathy. All right. So we'll get into those one by one. Starting, we felt like this would be as in increasing importance, kind of, maybe as in increasing roles. So the first one's a coworker, right? We think all the time about work. It's an obsession in America, especially in patriarchal culture. For men, work is a huge part of our identity. And it's often a way that we ignore emotions or, put a lot of our self into work. And so Daniel Carnegie is the author of How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it might be interesting to some people that I'm talking about a book from 1936. I hadn't read it in about a decade. So I went back and was just listening to the audio book, and it's still really good, still really emotionally attuned. And I still think really done in a good way. So just superficially, if you're looking at the book title, How to Win Friends and Influence People, might seem like it's kind of like a business thing, like a scam thing. Like, how can I win in business? The book is very much a self-help book. Okay. So Daniel Carnegie, as far back as 1912, he started teaching courses on how to win friends and influence people. He was like a writer, a journalist, as a lot of these good books are written by journalists. And so he then just developed these ideas and began teaching classes to mostly men in the business world, but not just men. Certainly was open to anybody on these ideas, right? And so How to Win Friends and Influence People has like a handful of tenets that I want to make sure I get right. So I'm going to read off. So the original book was broken down into parts. The 12 things this book will do for you, fundamental techniques in handling people, 12 ways to win people to your way of thinking, and be a leader on how to change people without giving offense or arousing resentment. So again, some of those key words, like to change them to your way of thinking. Like, I might choose a different way to describe that because the book is not manipulative. I could imagine anybody, coworker, friend, like the idea of how to communicate, how to understand people is something we could all use.
Yeah. I think one thing that really intrigues me about this book, as you're talking about it, I think about work-life balance a lot, right? And it's hard to just put work as a separate category from life, because we do spend so many hours working and we interact with so many people, and the interactions that we have affect our moods, our way of seeing things, our way of experiencing things, and we bring that home with us.
Sure.
To our pets, to our family, to our friends. So I think something that I like about this book, what sounds like, because I haven't read it yet, is it's just the continuity, like that. It really melds well with, these are all lessons that, the book is targeted to coworkers, but really it's something that can apply in all of life.
Yeah, a really good example. So the updated version of the book, because it's 100 years old, so it's been updated. The title on leadership is called Be a Leader, How to Change People Without Giving Offense or Arousing Resentment, right? So like change people sounds heavy-handed, but really when we're working with either coworkers, friends, hell, our kids when we're parenting, the whole point is I need to make them want to do the thing that I need them to do, right? And so a lot of times when we gaslight somebody or our boss says, you just have to do this, and you say, why? And they're like, because I fucking said so, right? That is obviously going to encourage resentment, right? So this book, even just as a gentle topic, it's like, hey, if you want people to do something for you, they're going to need to want to do it. And want can be pay, want can be tit for tat, right? But generally it can also be convincing of like, this is a worthwhile cause, something noble and something worth your time.
Right? It helps people buy into the idea and, way of being more than just ordering someone to do something. That doesn't have a lot of longevity to it.
Yeah.
In the workplace and everywhere else.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. So big fan. I thought it was poignant and funny to bring up a book from basically before psychology was a topic. And there definitely weren't, other than a lot of Freud's writings at this time, there was not self-help type books. This was very new when Carnegie was pitching this stuff.
So for the next category of books, we have for friendships, How to Communicate Like a Buddhist. We already mentioned that by Cynthia Kane. I really have enjoyed reading this book. I read it a few years back, and then I kind of read it again most recently as we were talking about this podcast. I think first off, it mentions how to communicate like a Buddhist, right? And so when people hear Buddhism, oftentimes the first thing that comes to their mind is monks wearing these orange robes. They have these like bells and sounds, and incense. And there's a lot of, religious practice that's
just thinking like people hear a religion of any kind and they might not think this is applicable to them or something that they can use.
Right. And I really like a quote that she starts her introduction with. It says, "Don't try to use what you learn from Buddhism to be a Buddhist. Use it to be a better whatever you already are," by the Dalai Lama. So the reason I think this book is an awesome addition to this list is that we can all improve or even take a step back and think about the way we communicate. Our communication styles, the way we relate to people, they often come from our really early environments. Our parents, our siblings, our teachers. We are absorbing a lot of things in our childhood, in our infancy, even, and even before in our prenatal period.
Yeah. It's like roles we get set in, right? Like you want to be a helper, you want to fix problems, you have to take care of people, right? These are all roles that get cemented very early on for us.
Right. And in those roles, it kind of locks us potentially into a way of communicating. Absolutely. And as we grow up, we try to pick and choose some things that we like how people speak, we like how they, communicate with others. And so we'll try to integrate that into our way of communicating. So one of the parts of this book that I like as well is that it kind of addresses the fact that there's no perfect communicator, right? We all have our moments where we're not able to express how we feel. Like if our friends invite us to do something and we're like, yeah, I'll do it. But really deep down, we're like, I'd rather just stay in and lay on my couch. It helps us kind of think about those things and the way we articulate them to the people around us.
Totally.
So in this book, she changes some of the Buddhist thoughts of right speech, which the old kind of way of talking about Buddhist right speech is abstaining from lying, from divisive speech, from abusive speech, and from idle chatter. She modernizes this a bit in her book and says, puts it into five parts to right speech and communication. So number 1 is listen to yourself. Number 2 is listen to others. Number 3 is speak consciously, concisely, and clearly. Number 4 is regard silence as parts of speech. And 5 is to meditate to enhance your communication skills.
Right.
These are all, sound pretty reasonable to me. So I think it's a great starting
point. So reasonable that last episode, Harrison talked about difficulties with pauses in socializing and like how to fill that space. which we don't need to. And next episode, we're covering mindfulness and meditation. So how lovely.
There we go.
Product placement, basically.
It all connects.
Yeah. And even if you think about, I was listening to Mark describe how to communicate like a Buddhist that I haven't read. And those statements are also covered in How to Win Friends and Influence People, the same topics, the same thing. So I think you're kind of seeing that these could all be different angles, business, religion, romance, whatever, but the concepts are very much the same. Communicate authentically, clearly, effectively, vulnerably, right? Those things that all help us communicate, just packaged in different, boxes. So, like, as somebody who hasn't read this book, Mark, I'm getting the vibe and the gist of it, but what do you take away as like the main takeaway that I would get or that Dr. Kane's trying to make?
Sure. Let's see. So, I think the idea that there's no perfect communicator, right? We all have moments where, so we say yes when we may really want to say no. Hanging out with friends. We can all relate to that sometimes, at work, taking on extra responsibilities that we maybe really, really don't want to, take on. And that kind of harkens back to the first, How to Win Friends and Influence People, at the coworker level.
Yeah.
The other thing that I like as part of not being perfect communicators, we also like sometimes talk over people. It's and we're
Never.
We're often thinking, 3 steps ahead in the conversation of like, what am I going to say next? Or something that they said a minute ago is like kind of bouncing around in our head, and we're not, we're thinking about that and being like, oh, what's this next thing I could say in the conversation?
Yeah.
So we all have these things, and even as aware as we may try to be in it, right? And part of Buddhism is trying to bring awareness and mindfulness to our experiences. The more we bring that awareness to it, the more we can kind of work on it and realize where we're making these, communication
Errors
or just ways that kind of prevent further
connectedness.
Yeah,
I was just thinking it's so true, right? Like mindfulness as a theme of Buddhism. I mean, really, that's where mindfulness and meditation as a source come from. So the idea that if you're ready to like pounce, and I know I've done this, and I can imagine anybody with ADHD tendencies do this by definition, right? Like I'm ready to say the next thing. When you're doing that, you're not listening to the rest of the conversation. So you might be holding that thought for 10, 15, 20 seconds. You got no damn clue what the person said the rest of the time until it was your turn to talk, right? So that makes a lot of sense that a Buddhist philosophy would really emphasize like patience in the communication, mindfulness within the communication.
Right. And I think that's, she can sum it up better than I can. On the back cover, it says, going through these 5 pieces of clear communication. And number 1 being listen to yourself. Number 2, listen to others. 3 is speak consciously, concisely, and clearly. 4 is regard silence as a part of speech. And 5 is meditate to enhance your communication skills.
Sure. Love that. Love that. We're going to do mindfulness and meditation next week as the start of our DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy block. So definitely going to come back to multiple of those points just next week, which is exciting. As Mark and I were talking about the overlap here, we thought of a few books we really like just in terms of communicating with people. One of them is called I Hate You, Don't Leave Me, Understanding Borderline Personality Pathology. And the other is Stop Walking on Eggshells, How to Take Your Life Back When Someone you know has a borderline personality. So it's a quick interjection. Borderline personality is very hot in the streets as a topic, and I'm going to cover that in a full episode in terms of developmental trauma. Generally speaking, it's the people in your life who've had something bad happen that has them fear abandonment. Okay, so a lot of people deal with this on a spectrum. All of us have it somewhere on that spectrum. The more you have that fear of abandonment, the harder you are to communicate with and the harder your relationships tend to be. So both of these books help you understand the mindset, either help for yourself and understanding these traits, but also understanding what's going on for the person across from you in the conversation, whether it be your romantic partner, a coworker, your family member, all of them possibles, and just to understand better what is going on in their mind so that you can communicate effectively and give the person whatever kind of attention, love, respect that you mean to help them. So that I wanted to include in the friend bundle, even though, again, can be a parenting thing with a teenager, can be a romantic partner thing in either gender direction. Our next book is talking about being a better romantic partner. And again, that can be within a relationship or as you're dating and learning to understand yourself. So Attached came out in 2014. Rachel Heller and Amir Levine, who's a child psychiatrist on the faculty at Columbia in New York. So this book is great. And since this book came out and has blown up, attachment styles have become very popular for young people to talk about within their relationships. So this book, and if you look up attachment styles, you're going to see a lot of different things, okay? Generally, the attachment that we think of in the psychiatry world is safe, secure attachment implies good enough parenting. Good enough parenting implies that you do well 66% of the time. 2/3 of the time, if you hit the right emotional note with your kid, they're going to be well attached and secure and stable in this world. 2 out of 3 times, y'all. I don't hope that's not too stressful. We're going to come back to how to do better here in our next book. So in this book, it shifts a little bit away from that and talks about relationship attachment styles, okay? So here in the book, they say anxious, avoidant, or secure. And of course, this book has a quiz for you to take so you can identify your own style. And the book goes through essentially anxious attachment are people who worry a lot about what's going on in their romantic relationship and they need to share and talk about it. Those people are anxious that you're going to leave them. They're nervous that you're cheating on them, right? Like these are all things that are common thoughts when you're in a relationship, especially if it doesn't feel stable, right? Or you're worried. So those people need to get it out. They need to get validation. They need to get support from the loved one to feel secure within the relationship, okay? Avoidant people are all the way on the other side of the spectrum. They don't want to talk about their emotions. They're not going to share, right? And they keep that stuff in and they're going to avoid emotional topics anywhere, but certainly within the confines of a romantic relationship. Both of these are challenging. Both of these create problems in the relationship. Sadly, we have over time labeled anxious attachment style as a female thing and avoidant attachment style as a male thing. And let me tell you, folks, if you've been out in these streets, you know that that is not the case 100% in either direction, right? So secure attachment is the goal, the hope, what we're all working towards, because you can change your attachment style through therapy. Everybody say it with me, right? So therapy, hard work, learning, and good communication styles and practice can get us closer to the center. Secure people, it means what it sounds, right? If you're secure in your relationships, your romantic relationships, you have trust, you have faith in the person you're working with. Again, can be friendships, but here we're talking romance. And you're not so worried about if this person goes out with some friends or they go on a bachelor party, right? You're like, I trust them. My sense of safety in this world is stable. I'm not worried about them abandoning me. I can communicate my feelings openly and honestly without defense mechanisms, without caveats, right? And so those people, generally, that's the goal, to be securely attached. And I think as much as we know what anxious and avoidant people look like, we also know what secure people look like. Pretty chill, pretty go with the flow, pretty content in most environments, and also pretty content with themselves, right? So that's the core of the book. It talks about how to communicate, how to navigate the situations when your partner is one style or the other, what to know about yourself if you are one style or the other, and what kind of patterns to avoid that might make difficult relationships difficult.
Yeah, that sounds super interesting. This is one of those books that I haven't read, haven't gotten a chance to read yet. But, you know, I think what kind of comes up for me is going back to the borderline books that we talk, or like how to work with borderline individuals in our lives, is that everything's on a spectrum, right? And so, you know, I think when I think about attachment, there are moments where we have secure attachment. There are moments when we have anxious avoidant attachment, and everything in between. And they may be different with different people. Maybe I feel secure in one of my relationships, and I have a secure type of attachment, but maybe there's another friendship or romantic partner or something like that, you know, I have more of an anxious avoidant attachment to.
Yeah.
And those, like we're talking about, right, they all come from our early life experiences and the way in which we're, you know, bond and attached to our parents, to our siblings, to our family.
Relationship models too in our lives can definitely play a role. Like you've seen this as the model of a relationship, so you may know better, but unconsciously you don't know any different than this is what the relationship should be like. So we all know people who always end up in dramatic relationships. In our business, we call that repetition compulsion. Big old word, right? Yeah. So we have the desire to correct issues from our past.
And I think too, right, there's a degree to where that's your exposure to what love is, right? You don't have much of a, you know, in your home environment, that's all you're exposed to. That's your world, especially for the first few years in a lot of ways. And so, you know, if you're as a child, we're so eager to bond with our parents because that's so necessary for our survival, among other things, right? And that's how we interpret love. You know, again, right, at an unconscious level, we can make those connections, that maybe screaming is what love means, or, you know, having rage or drinking. Like that's what we become unconsciously compelled to how do you say it? What do you say? To gravitate.
Yeah, or to consider love, right? Like Mark's point. So I love this book. I read it and benefited from it in my romantic relationships and within my own therapy. This has been really important for me as somebody who struggles with avoidant attachment style.
Yeah, so another book, I think this is a pretty incredible book here. This is by Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. This is The Whole Brain Child. You know, I think one of the main things that I emphasize in the way I think about patients, about myself, about everything there is, right, is development. And going back again, right, to our early life environment, right? Our brains, I think about 90% of our cortex, right? That's the fancy big part of our brain, develops after we're born. And it's really sensitive to our environmental influences, right? That's like, as you know, silly as it can be, but like sounds that are in our environment, visuals in our environment, right? And certain things get stimulated and certain things get neglected. And that kind of contributes to crafting who we are.
The thing that Mark and I would be extremely frustrated with is when people say, oh, they're just a baby, they're not going to remember that, right? Which we have a ton of research now that says that is untrue, 100%. Remember, like, be able to tell you about it when they're 25? No. Encoded into their brain and having learned from an experience? Yes. So while that sounds like pressure, parents, truly 2/3 of the time, you don't need to be perfect. We're going to talk more on those specific strategies on and off throughout this podcast, I'm sure.
Right. And so I think, you know, as a parent, ideally reading this book to you know, kind of appreciate the developmental steps of a child's mind, it can really help to understand that kids are not just small adults, right? They don't have the same ability to regulate their behaviors, their emotions. You know, they're a bit more disinhibited than we are, and to expect them to behave in an adult way and with adult standards, whatever that means to society, is asking the impossible. Right. And so a few things about this book, you know, it divides the brain into a few kind of categories, right? And the brain has been divided in a bunch of different ways historically. And so you can look at all these different pathways that exist. You can look at these particular parts of the brain that are dedicated to like memory or visual, but they're really all interconnected. But sometimes it's a little easier to understand it if we can like break it down into its pieces. So it kind of separates it into 4 pieces, right? So one is the left brain and the right brain. The left brain can be thought of as liking law and order, and it's more rigid and it's more concrete. You know, our right brain is more creative. It's more of our ability to express ourselves emotionally. And so understanding that we have these 2 parts of our brain that are kind of working together or in conflict with one another really contributes to, you know, the way in which we then behave as a little kid or as an adult. And then it talks about the upstairs and the downstairs brain, right? Totally. We talked about how a lot of that part of the brain develops after birth. The upstairs brain, right? The downstairs brain, going back to what we mentioned before about like fight or flight response, you know, that's to keep us safe, to
Right.
keep it. It's for survival, really. And so,
We call it our lizard brain, our
Yeah.
like primal brain. I've seen a million things, but it's the quick reaction stuff. So when Mark says upper and lower, this is real. Right and left is also real brain comments. So we have our brain stem, kind of like what the brain we think of as here, right? Here's a right brain. So below this is the brain stem that then leads into the spinal cord. So the brain stem is what controls a lot of our quick reactions. Quick reactions to, say I hear something, gunshot in the side, I'm going to react before I even think because my brain stem is ready to do that.
Right. And so, when we perceive things as threats, right, we go into that lower brain, or the downstairs brain, sorry. Yeah. So, when that's turned on, it's really hard to use the other upstairs part of our brain. We're kind of stuck in that mode until we can kind of de-escalate, our cortisol release, our adrenaline release, all of those things.
Sure.
And so, as a kid, you don't necessarily have this whole lifetime of experiences with which to understand, what's happening to you. So,
and you also haven't practiced using different coping skills to help regulate yourself when you're conquered by the downstairs brain or the brainstem, right? So that's an idea. Is we think kids should just be able to go sit in the corner or sit in timeout and regulate, but how on earth would they regulate without the help and learning, right?
Right. And that goes back to how the brain develops, right? If we just kind of leave a kid to, sit in the corner without any what we would call integration of the experience to help them kind of process the sensations and the feelings and the thoughts, and whatever's coming up, they won't have a place to put that if we don't help them. And so if we don't understand that the brains need these certain molding over a lifetime, over childhood, infancy into childhood, then that can really, really have a detrimental effect to the kid. Not to be a doomsday prophesizer, but I think having an appreciation of development. Yeah.
My friends and family who have children have heard me recommend this book a lot. And I took some of the core takeaways that I took were being able to validate someone's emotional experience. So if Mark is the kid, he's upset about the way he was bullied at school today. If I tell him, hey, suck it up, dude, stop being a punk, like go punch him, that's what Mark's going to know. That's all he's going to learn, is that he shouldn't be hurt when people are mean to him. He should react with aggression and violence. Y'all could imagine that's still out there in these streets. That is still extremely common for fathers to teach their sons. And hell, mothers to teach their daughters, whatever. It just depends on where you are. What this book would tell you is to say, Mark, that's really hard. I know I was bullied when I was younger. It was terrible. What do you think we should do about it? When you do that, you do multiple things. One, you validate, which helps regulate the lower brain and lets you use the upper brain. Okay? So that's what validation does. It's a coping skill in itself. It allows you to relate and connect. I got bullied too, man. It sucked, right? You can do that quickly as a parent to be open and honest. Kids appreciate that. Them knowing you've been in that situation, especially as they get older. When they're teenagers, they get feisty again, but we all know that. And then to foster independence and to let your kid know, hey, I trust you to figure this out, or I trust that with my support, you can figure this out. And therefore, what do you think, Mark? If you're the kind of parent or friend who says, I just want to solve everybody's problems, I just want to fix it for them, I don't want them to feel bad, so we're going to go to the principal, we're going to take you out of the school and homeschool you, right? These are all things you'll want to do as a parent if your kid's been bullied, and none of them are going to be helpful. You want to protect them, of course you do. But here we're talking about how to foster independence, how to help them be stable and think they can solve it on their own. These are the kind of things that will allow them to do that.
Yeah. I guess one thing I'm thinking about, just to like back up in the initial steps of this book,
integrating, right?
Yeah. Or just like coming back from, let's say I come from home and I'm just crying and I'm really emotionally overwhelmed, right? There's this book I like. The part about it that I like as well is that's my downstairs brain that's really active right now. And so, maybe at that initial phase, talking about it is not what I need right then and there. Maybe earlier on, I need to feel safe. And what does safety mean, right? I think probably a lot of parents can totally understand, right? Like kids screaming at 2:00 in the morning, like that's pretty intense, right? And so I think finding a way to help the child kind of first feel safety, first feel heard, is really a cool part of this book.
Really
right?
important thing, right? Like if your kid is crying, you want to say, I know how you feel. This is so hard. Let's make sure you're fed. Like parents don't think these things mean anything to those kids, but as much as they know the words, they pick up on the vibes, right? Which is, I am not threatened by your crying. I'm not taking it personally, as a lot of parents struggle with. Your crying is not a punishment towards your parent. It is just what a baby is doing because they are a baby. It is just what a young kid is doing because they're still learning how to integrate those emotions, right? So really good stuff. I want to shout out my own brother and his wife, my brother David and Janie, who are 9-month-old Tobin. I'm thoroughly impressed by how they do things all the time, and I think they've been open to feedback and are really impressing me as young parents. So just shout out.
And honestly, I think this book is a pretty easy read. And
it's
even
like
if you don't,
this thick, so lots of pictures. Pictures and examples. So very easy.
Yeah,
Hours.
Absolutely. And honestly, stuff, if you don't have a kid, this is all stuff or understanding about our brain that will help in general, right? My downstairs brain gets activated sometimes too. And what are ways in which I can understand and also maybe have some empathy, patience, compassion for my own mind when I'm in those fight or flight modes or my downstairs brain mode.
It really does a good job teaching how to validate someone else. And then it does a really good job of giving strategies to parents for self-validation and how to not make mistakes. So it really does walk you through, like I brought up a couple episodes ago, if you're going to scream at your kid, right, when they're doing something you don't want them to do, just walk away. You'd be better served, unless they're about to do something dangerous or unsafe, touch the oven when it's hot, put their hand in the garbage disposal, go crazy, yell. It's what you got to do. Let them know that that's not safe, right? But if it's like they haven't cleaned up their toys yet, going ballistic on them is not going to foster a positive relationship. It's not going to bring you closer together, right? Take a step back, take a breath, come at them when you're ready with a clear heart and mind. Another book that I love for parenting that we're not going to dive in is called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk, right? Great book. I think that it applies to more than just your relationships with children. Mark made this point of that kids are not little adults. In fact, all the research and science and experience that we have would say that adults are really just large children, right? There is no magical moment. It's not like age 25 when our brain stops developing that we're like magically glued together and better at this shit. Some 35-year-olds are emotionally 2, 10, 20, or 35 years old. Depends on your life experiences. And oftentimes, difficult things that happen will leave you back further in time.
Some 10-year-olds can be 35-year-olds.
Some 10-year-olds can be 35-year-olds, right? We've heard the term parentified. But yeah, age is just a number in mental health. To me, it truly is just a number. The Step Up book, which is a little too intense for this, is called the Psychodynamic Primer. This is thicker. It's not quite like Freud's psychoanalytic babble, but it is a step up in emotional intensity. A great book if you really want to understand development from the lens of psychodynamic therapy, which we'll touch on in a few weeks, but kind of the way Mark and I see it. So what should be going on at this age? What would be good to be going on at this age? Like, what are the themes, that we learned about developmental stages? That's a great book. Highly recommend.
Yeah. And I think, in talking about a lot of these books that address parenting, right? We don't want to be, kind of condemning parents to this, if you haven't done this, things are just going to be shitty from now on. But I think one of the big things about these books is that it helps kind of correct the track, correct the path that you're on. And kind of it shows that, that 66% that you're talking about.
So the big sweeping finale to this is how to be a better person, right? That could be the whole thing. I think when Mark and I were originally talking about these 5 books, it would have probably gone under this category as a whole. But again, original. To be a better, right. So this was the original book. So how to keep, the body keeps the score. Okay. Bessel van der Kolk, OG, my guy. Right. So a lot of you listening to this have probably read this book. It is so popular now. The idea of this book is Bessel van der Kolk was in his psychiatry residency in Boston when guys were coming back from Vietnam War, right? And so people came back. We all remember the term shell shocked and other like war neuroses, old terms for PTSD. When people came back from Nam, they were fucked up, right? In a way that we had not seen before because that war was conducted in a way that war had never been conducted, right? So he was like, what do we do with these veterans? They're broken from the core. Their hearts, their souls, and their brains are broken. And so he was on the group of psychiatrists that went on to develop the formal PTSD diagnosis, which we now use. It was really that, and I talked about this with Freud. We used to talk about trauma a lot in Freud's early years, and then trauma just for whatever reason got put away as a topic or a reason to think about why things are happening. And it got brought back up again in like the 70s and 80s when guys were coming back from Vietnam. So it's sad that it kind of wasn't okay to talk about. And then him and those people that pushed on this kind of reopened trauma as the topic and really the core. So what this book does, it not only helps you define PTSD, that's one and very basic of it, it explains to you the concept of developmental trauma. So not having gone back to war, but trauma within your upbringing. And again, that can be like single incident, severe case of abuse or assault, but also, again, all those micro little things that happen along the way. What this book taught me is that people are, like I talked about sense of self, just an amalgamation, a combination of a little bit of genetics splashed in with all the things that have happened to us throughout our lives. And when you're able to take a step back and think about that within your interactions, it increases your empathy by a millionfold. Right? I actually like to joke that I used to love to hold a grudge, and I can't do it anymore. Right? I've worked so hard on building empathy for people that if somebody does something I don't like, I can pretty quickly understand why they did it and help take the heat off my own brain and how upset I might be about this action. So I think the book does that. It also explains the concept, right? So the subtitle of the book is Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma. So we now know through the ACEs study, the Adverse Childhood Events study, that the body literally holds on to traumatic events through stress and through, I would say, dysregulate, kind of reprogramming our immune system via our brain, right? So people who've had trauma get more sick. They have higher rates of cancer, higher rates of heart disease, right? There's not just a physical component to that. If you've lived under chronic stress, which can be within your household, chronic poverty, divorce, moving a lot as a kid, all of those are considered chronic stressors or ACEs, and they literally impact your body and they worsen your immune system, increase your risk of cancers and other autoimmune diseases. So this is where this concept, the brain, body, mind connection has all come up. It's why we use things like, certain autoimmune conditions, fibromyalgia, and other things that we understand, even chronic pain, that we understand there's a connection between the mind and the body. And this is a book that does a wonderful job. In fact, it being the book that first touched onto that topic. And so, hey, it took me 3 minutes to tell you what I learned from it when I was in the business of knowing it. And all that stuff was new for me and has been, if anybody's watched my path, since I read this book, I have caught on fire with loving mental health and psychology and psychiatry, and I've never looked back. And this was the book that helped me see people how, like you said, this is the book. Like this is the book that we would want people to start with viewing the world and individually people, how we would like them to see it, how we'd like you to see it.
Right. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways this book encapsulates just, again, speaking back to how kind of all of these books are connected, right? Development and just how we become the people that we are, understand ourselves and the world around us. And, sometimes I think in training, I remember one of our attendings, right, our supervisors said, like, life is inherently traumatic. And so
Remember who that was?
I can't remember.
Would love to shout out.
But it stuck with me.
Sure.
And if we think about it, right, especially because trauma is like a topic that's really kind of bubbling up nowadays, right? Like Vietnam War time, it was certainly not something people wanted to talk about. It was too painful. It was maybe even too real, right? And so, I think we talk about like big T traumas and little T traumas.
Just going to transition to that, yeah.
And big T traumas being these like very distinct events that people can be like, okay,
car crash, war, sexual assault, right? Like single incident, big T trauma.
And little T traumas can be these things like in our everyday life, right? If we have a really challenging interaction with someone, if someone insults us, if someone screams at us, and even little things like that. And
because you're taking and learning from those moments, right? Like, let's say you're a victim of like a hate crime in just a mild way, right? Like your race, your religion is called into effect. You might then take that and be like, I'm just not gonna bring that up, not gonna talk about it. I'm gonna shy away from it. So that is a response to a lower trauma, even though your life might not have been at risk in that moment. Bullying.
And I think it speaks to kind of one of the most, in my mind and the book's mind, I think one of the most harmful things is negating or denying or gaslighting someone's trauma, right? Because at that point, and this is a big part of it, right? And I think that makes PTSD so much more powerful in its symptoms, right? Because if we don't have a place with which to integrate the experience and the trauma, if we don't have a context to be like, this is what happened, it was a terrible thing, and kind of try to understand it when we're developmentally ready for it, we integrate it into our body, and our body remembers it. Our body keeps the score, and it may keep it in a kind of disorganized way. It may come out in chronic aches and pains. It may come out in disabilities.
Yeah.
It may come out in certain,
depression, right?
Yeah,
can definitely be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I talk about this because this, again, is the basis for everything. So when Mark and I think, what's the word, you're right on. What's the word I would want to use for how I want people to think? It's developmentally, which is that nobody is anything. Nobody is black or white. Nobody is 0 or 100. We are constantly changing, especially in our youth, where it's most changing. As we get older, we change less and less, but we're constantly changing, and we are able to change how we think. And even those physical symptoms, those predispositions, can improve using different types of therapy. So this book talks a lot about different types of somatic therapies. So mindfulness and meditation to get in touch with our body and develop a core of safety, yoga to do similar things and to help our breath and to help our awareness of our body, art therapy, dance therapy. And it even talks about why when you've had a lot of big bad trauma, the medications are not as helpful as they are in other situations that might be the cause of your issues. So it's really, really, really good. And again, something that if you're watching this podcast, you've probably already heard me recommend, or hell, I might even have patients watching this and they've heard me talk about these concepts, big T, little T trauma, recommend this book in particular. And again, really, I don't know if I didn't read this book, I don't know what would have happened, but I would have been much crankier in this profession for a longer time, for sure.
Yeah, it definitely adds a whole dimension to mental health as a concept and as a practice. I think because you're mentioning medications may not be enough to help kind of treat the PTSD symptoms or help treat trauma, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's in psychiatry, what comes to me is this split of like the biological versus the psychological, or like the biological versus the developmental. Or biological versus therapy.
Yeah.
And
meds versus therapy. Actually.
Meds versus therapy.
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good way to think
and,
about it.
I think a lot of like the common, in my mind, right, my perception of the common perception is that people think psychiatrists, they just medicate me away.
Correct.
And the meds are just going to dull me and turn me into a zombie. Some meds do have pretty severe side effects and can the way you are can be interpreted as kind of zombified.
Sure. Harder hitting meds used for harder hitting conditions like severe bipolar and schizophrenia.
Right. Exactly. And if you're treating appropriately, it won't necessarily.
Risk benefits should always make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it speaks to, and as psychiatrists, right, one thing I think trying to do here is reduce the stigma that we're not just people who see, a disease, mental health issue as a disease, right? We see it as a combination of factors that, a set of life experiences lead to. Maybe a genetic predisposition right? It makes it a little easier to succumb to depression or anxiety or psychosis. But ultimately, right, it's the life experiences that kind of hone us in that direction.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I think appreciating, the medications can have their role, but also remembering the human component, the human experience component, that, we're not just, you can't just treat depression. You can't just treat trauma like you do a strep throat.
Right. No, and part of what I love about being a psychiatrist is that our goals get to be more ill-defined and more like vague than treating lab values and things like that, which is so great. I specifically, when I just like people ask me to be talk about being a psychiatrist. So when people ask me about being a psychiatrist, I get from people, you manage medications. I like to stop them, especially if you've done child training like I have, or you just happen to be like Mark and be like somebody who's really read Freud stuff and thought about development throughout his whole life, right? My 5 years of training, I say, was 80% therapy, 20% medications. And that feels about right. We went through a really good psychiatry program here in Colorado, and I felt very equipped to understand people in the world that way, right? So that shocks patients of mine, parents, friends. They're like, I'm like, yeah, we're therapists primarily. That is what our job is. That's what we're good at, right? So this book really emphasizes that if we're thinking about people the right way, then we're going to hit the right note more often than not. We're going to make the right recommendation. When I'm working with children in particular and thinking about prescribing medications for anxiety, depression, PTSD, ADHD, we should always have a path forward for coming off of that medication. Some of those are exceptions: severe mental illness, bad schizophrenia, right? Those are people that are going to be on meds for their life, most likely. Most people, if we're pairing therapy can be having tough conversations, leaving an abusive relationship, quitting a shitty job, all forms of lifestyle changes that could be considered therapy, right? The medications will help you do those things. They will get you closer to being able to do those healthy things. They're not going to do them for you, right? So if we can improve those tenets of things that will help our depression, then the medications might not be needed forever, right? And so that's the way I frame it with patients and parents, because I think that makes it feel much safer and much more approachable, the thought of using medication.
Yeah, I like that. Like, just meds are kind of a tool to help you get to that next step, right?
Sure.
Like if someone's so depressed that they're stuck in bed and have, no energy and no kind of motivation or desire to get up and live life, the meds can kind of help you get to that next level, right? Some people are feeling so rough that therapy is such a daunting prospect that kind of the step before that's where meds can I think be.
I don't know if you give a number, but I use this kind of jokingly based off research that if the medicines could help 30%, wow, how great would that be? Because if you're a 10 out of 10 anxious and you come down to a 7, I know it's not better, but it's a whole hell of a lot better, and you're going to notice a major difference. So I think the medications are meant to do that. And then we can help with support of our friends, family, and therapists get the rest of the way. Yeah. It's good shit. This has been a conversation in the making since 2017 or 18.
Yeah.
We've probably joked about this topic, which would definitely look different, I think, if you and I were just picking 5 books, but we love these also. And I'm so happy we got to do this, man. This is awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. Sweet. We communicated,
What up, y'all? Stoked to finish like we do with citing our sources. Today was pretty straightforward. Most of the content Mark and I got to today during the interview was from those books. Go read them. Hit us up and ask for specifiers if you were confused, okay? Like, that's just me and Mark when we get stoked about this stuff. Like, I hope you will be someday too. You talk about something, it goes off on a tangent. We're thinking about people and we're thinking hard, all right? Other sources, I don't know. I guess I learned about Russ's joining of the Nuggets by Sports Center's Facebook. So interesting enough, but thanks Facebook, I guess. And we use Spotify and YouTube to help present on Shea, in addition to all the information about him on the internet, stuff that he mostly shares. So what a great episode, y'all. Let's put it in together. We're 7 weeks into this journey. It's going great. Thank you again all for the birthday love. All the reposting and helping us spread the word is huge. And guys, we're getting there. All evidence that I have says that we're ahead of schedule in terms of the impact that we're making and the impact we can have. All right. So we're getting 5,000 more stickers in this week. If anybody listens to this and wants me to send them a stack, I'm happy to. All right. Otherwise, we're huddling up. Feelings on 3. 1, 2, 3. Feelings. All right. See you next week.